Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're a subscriber, welcome back. It's great to have you here. So on my channel, I talk about savvy luxury shopping and buying timeless designer pieces. I also talk a lot about designer ready-to-wear. So I wanted to dedicate today's video to my best tips on how to take care of your designer clothing. Of course, these tips could also work for any clothing items whatsoever, but I think they are especially important when we talk about the designer and luxury ready-to-wear because all of those items come with a huge price tag. So if you're interested in hearing 10 of my best tips on how to take care of your designer ready-to-wear items, let's go. My first tip is actually fairly simple, and it is always follow the care instructions on the label. Now, I've made some mistakes in the past, and I'm really not keen to repeat them at all. So nowadays, I always look at the label very carefully, and if it says dry clean, this is exactly what I do. I dry clean the item. If it says wash in cold water, this is exactly what I do. I wash it in cold water. And if it says that the item should be hand washed, I hand wash the item. By the way, I always hear people say two things about dry cleaning. First of all, it's very expensive and the bill really adds up. And secondly, people also say that dry cleaning chemicals are actually really bad for our health. So, from my perspective, I'm going to say two things to this. First of all, when it comes to the cost, yes, that's true. Dry cleaning bills really do add up. But if I choose to spend a lot of money on buying a designer clothing item, I'm also going to choose to actually spend money on taking care of that item. And I think that this is something that we should consider upfront when we are actually making a designer purchase. And when it comes to the chemicals that are used for dry cleaning, I really have no clue, to be honest. I don't have any real knowledge about this whatsoever. But the only thing I would mention is that on daily basis, we are exposed to so many harmful elements. I do not know, for example, sugar and sodium in our food, or radiation when we take a flight, or all the car exhaust when we walk on the street. So, from my humble perspective, dry cleaning chemicals, just cannot be so much worse than all of those other things. So my first tip is to always follow instructions or care instructions on the label. By the way, my name is Lisa and I'm your guide to savvy luxury shopping no matter where in the world you are. Subscribe to my channel to learn more about strategic luxury shopping with the emphasis on quality and timelessness of your items. My second tip is about the dry cleaning, and it is to always to communicate to dry cleaners about any issues with the garment. And here I'm really talking about two things. First of all, when I take my garments to dry cleaning, I show any spots or any dirt that I might actually have on those garments. And if I know, I try to tell the dry cleaners about how those spots actually got there, because it becomes important when they make a decision about how to treat the garments. Then I also point out any issues or anything about the garment that I feel that dry cleaners should know. So, for example, this is things like bulky hardware. I know that for dry cleaning, if you have bulky hardware on your items, they might want to kind of wrap up that hardware or cushion that hardware because the garment goes into, I don't know, some kind of machine. So, just in case they do not notice this, I always point out large hardware. Also, if this is maybe largely a linen or a cotton item, I actually point out if it has any silk inserts or maybe leather trims, because that also becomes important, especially for maybe any issues with color transfer. And generally speaking, if there is any hardware on the item, maybe any leather patches on trousers or something like this, I try to point out those things to dry cleaners so maybe they are not surprised and that doesn't cause any type of issues. So my second point is basically communicate extensively with the dry cleaners when you drop off the items and point out any spots, any issues, any peculiarities about your items. My third tip is to always go for the most conservative care option. So oftentimes, if you look at the label of a garment, it would actually give you a couple of options for care. So for example, it could say that the item could be hand washed or dry cleaned, or maybe hand washed and also put in a washing machine on a gentle cycle. So whenever I see a couple of options, I always choose the most conservative option. So for example, if the label says that the item could be dry cleaned or hand washed, I would actually take the item to dry cleaning because I trust specialists more than I trust myself. And if the label says that the item can be washed in a washing machine or it can be hand washed, I always choose to hand wash the item because I would trust myself more than I would trust my washing machine. So basically, my third tip is to always go for the most conservative option out of the different care options that you might be given on the label of the item. My next tip is use gentle detergent when washing your designer items. So once again, if I actually spend money on a designer ready-to-wear piece, I'm also going to spend money on the detergent that I actually use to wash that piece. So for many years now, I have been using Perwool or Perwoll detergent. I will put a couple of pictures right here. And so far it has been working quite well. I think this particular detergent is actually available in many countries and many different markets, so it is easy to get. But basically, my suggestion is get the best detergent that you're comfortable with when it comes to washing your designer items. And I usually try to make sure that I have a separate detergent for all of my black items, then another separate detergent for all of my colored or colorful items, and then maybe just some kind of regular detergent for things like towels and bed sheets, because I'm not going to be using kind of that same gentle detergent for things that are a little bit more everyday. Anyway, the next tip is invest in the best detergent you possibly can and use gentle detergent when it comes to washing your designer items. My fifth tip for taking care of your designer clothing is do not soak your luxury designer items in water for a long time. So basically, I think we all know that if you keep something in water for a long time, that inevitably the color will bleach. And when it comes to my designer luxury purchases, generally speaking, I don't get them too dirty. I don't run into them, I don't work out in them. So I do not think that any of those items actually need to be soaking in water for a very long time. So if I hand wash those items, I make sure that I don't keep them in the water for a very long time. And if I wash them in a washing machine, I also choose a very short cycle without any additional soaking components to that cycle. So to me, it is very important to not soak my luxury designer clothing items in water for a very long time. And my tip number 6 is maybe kind of similar, but it is not to overwash your luxury and designer ready to wear pieces. So I think we have a habit of washing everything just after one wear. But oftentimes, if I wore a garment maybe for 2 or 3 hours and I look at the piece of clothing and it is actually not dirty and I don't have any spots on it, I think that I can actually re-wear that item at least 2 or maybe even 3 more times. I think that washing or even dry cleaning items very frequently can really damage the color and damage the fabric. So I basically take care of things that I wear, and unless they're actually legitimately dirty or I worn them for more than just one time, I choose not to wash them. I know this could be maybe a very controversial point. I do not know. Let me know down in the comments if you wash all of your garments just after one wear. But I think it actually makes sense to look at the piece of clothing, assess whether it's actually dirty or not, and then make a decision about washing or dry cleaning it. My tip number 7, if you're washing or hand washing your items, lay them flat to dry. So what I usually do is I take a towel, and it's usually a white towel just to stay on the safe side. And then I place this towel on top of a drying rack, and then I place the garment on top of the towel. Now, the reason that I do this is I want to make sure that the garment doesn't get out of shape, doesn't get stretched out if it's wet and I'm hanging it up. Now, you can hang the garment after it has been laid down to dry for a bit of time, and you feel that the fabric is not going to be damaged if you actually decide to hang the item. But for me, to make sure that the item doesn't stretch out, it doesn't lose its shape, at the very beginning, I always lay the clothing item flat to dry. My tip number 8, invest in a steamer. Now, I really do not like ironing. I mean, I don't think anybody does. And I think a steamer is a great investment. First of all, you can actually use a steamer in between washes and in between dry cleaning to kind of, freshen up your items. Secondly, I think this is a great way to get all the creases out of your items without actually having to iron them. And I think that ironing has a greater potential of actually damaging the fabric of your items. Now, one thing I would say that with the steamers that we can actually just buy in the store, I don't think it is actually possible to press out like a cotton button-up shirt perfectly. So what I do with those is that I actually get them washed at dry cleaners, and the dry cleaners would wash them and then kind of steam and press them professionally so they look impeccable. And that's again another investment that I decided to make, to make sure that my garments look as good as I possibly can. But on day-to-day basis, for some other pieces of clothing, to get rid of the wrinkles, to freshen up your clothing, I think a good steamer is a great investment. My tip number 9 is a broad one, but it is keep your items organized well in your closet. And this has to do basically with the fact that I think the way we keep our items has a great impact on their longevity. So, just to give you a couple of examples, I never hang up my knitwear. And that's because I think if we put knitwear on a hanger, it can actually stretch out the knit, especially in the shoulder area. Another example is that when I hang my items, I actually try to make sure that there is enough space between each of the items so they're not pressed tightly against each other. I also always organize my items by color, maybe going from dark to light or light to dark. And that's basically to make sure that I do not have like a very dark, black shirt, maybe pressed up against like a white item. And because I think that with time, there is always a small chance of a color transfer. And last but not least, I try to fold my items appropriately before I place them on the shelf or I place them in a drawer, if this is something that I do not hang up. And again, I do not want the items to crease unnecessarily, so I want to make sure that I fold them really well, and when I pull them out, they're actually ready to go and I can wear them. Anyway, the way we organize, the way we fold and hang and keep our items really has a very large impact on how well those items will keep. So my point is make sure that your closet is organized well. And the last tip that I have is also really quite broad, but it basically is keep track of the wear and tear on your items. For me, this is very important because it actually helps me to learn about how certain clothing pieces are holding up, and this in the future informs my future purchasing decisions. So, for example, if I notice that a certain garment from a certain designer, I don't know, creases or snags very easily, the next time I'm actually going to make a choice to not buy that particular item. And also vice versa. If something is holding up really well, no matter how much I wear and use it and how much I wash it or take it to dry cleaners, then I make a mental note that a garment like this is a worthwhile purchase. So for example, also, if I do notice that something is being damaged, then I would maybe make a change in how I actually choose to use that item. So if I have a shirt that's maybe developing snags on the shoulder where I would wear like a crossbody bag, then in the future, I would decide to actually maybe wear a clutch with that particular shirt instead. And in the future, once again, I would make a note to myself to not buy a shirt from the same fabric, the same material, or from the same designer. So I think keeping track of wear and tear is just a very good habit, and it can really help us learn from our purchases and make better purchasing decisions in the future. All right, that's it for today. Those were my 10 tips of how to take care of your designer ready to wear pieces. Now, let me know in the comments down below if there is something specific that you do, because I think we could all benefit from exchanging that information. And before you go, please watch this video next. So in this video, I'm trying on a lot of ready to wear items from the fall winter 2024 Hermes collection. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Take care and bye bye.